Hello, everybody. Welcome to Curry and Mitchell, from Watts to Brooklyn, and dare I say all points in between and beyond. I'm Sheldon Curry here along with my good friend James Mitchell, and we're going to discuss a number of topics in the sports world, politics, and anything else that we deem relevant and that we think you might find interesting. So thanks for joining us. What's up, good brother?
Everything's good. Beautiful warm day here in the Carolinas. Going through a little, what they call an Indian summer phase, I guess.
All right.
Yeah. A lot of stuff jumping off in the last few hours.
Yeah, a lot of it, man. And I guess let's start with the big news out of the NBA. Steve Nash fired after 7 games and a 2-5 start. Take a stab at it.
Yeah, well, that the management at the Brooklyn Nets has probably come to their senses somewhat. Got rid of a guy who they shouldn't have hired to begin with. And Jacque Vaughn, who's an assistant coach now, who's going to be the interim coach. And he was an assistant coach under the last regime. And the last few games before Nash came in last year, the season before last, he finished the season as the interim coach. And a lot of people thought that he might get a shot because he did such a good job of being the head coach last year. But then, as we know, we brought in this marquee guy, Nash, who didn't know what he was doing. And now they've dumped him, and Jacque is back in the same position. But the big news I've heard on top of that is that there's a report that the Nets are looking at Mecca from Boston.
Ime Udoka, yeah.
Ime Udoka, I messed his name up. Excuse me for that.
Yeah.
Udoka. And within the next 24 to 48 hours, they might be announcing that they're going to bring him in as the head coach if they get Boston to release him from the contract. And that would be very interesting to see if that happens.
Yeah, that's real interesting. And you wonder if Boston will ask for a draft choice.
Right.
Because he is under contract, even though I think we all kind of believe that he would never coach in Boston again.
More than likely not.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, so that's really, big news coming out of the Apple, man. That's kind of surprising, I guess. I didn't know that they would move that quickly on him, but they're trying to, repair a mistake that they made by bringing him in. He was over his head in that position. Never should be put in that position to begin with.
Well, let's mull this over for a sec. How likely do you think Boston would release him of his contract to go to a team in their division, and a team that most people believe have as much talent as anybody in the NBA? So not only would they challenge for the supremacy of that division, I guess that's the Atlantic Division, but also the Eastern Conference, as well as contending for a championship. So what do you think the likelihood is that they would let a coach as good as Udoka go to their rival?
Right. I guess it comes down to whether or not they intend to bring him back at all or not. Because they might just make him sit for a year rather than do it right now and pay him off, I guess. But they can let him go and get him off their books. That's one way you can look at it. I don't know how the contract stuff works, but I would bet they wouldn't have to pay him if he's under employee of the Nets. I don't know, but I don't know what his contract is like presently. They might have to pay him anyway, so that might be an issue. But that's a very interesting point of view.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, I think the way it generally works is when you go to another team like that, that the team would either negotiate a new contract, but the other team would not have to pay, or whatever the difference would be. So, for instance, if Udoka, for whatever reason, would get less, particularly if there's a transaction involved, like a draft choice or a player, we would just, Brooklyn would only have to pay the difference. But I was just wondering about the likelihood, because you're right. Your biggest point would be getting from under his contract, and I think the reports were when this mess, the scandal first broke, and that he was going to continue to get paid as he was suspended or most of his contract. I think it was reported to be getting about $5 to $6 million a year. So to your point, if they were done with him, and they want to, save $5 or $6 million, you're absolutely right.
And possibly just get him behind them totally,
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
That whole issue.
And move it on.
Right. So it would make sense in that level. And it's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds. Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's go back to Jacque Vaughn just real briefly, because to your point, he was the interim coach that finished the 2019-2020 season, the season prior to Nash coming on full time. I think he went 7-3. And then, like you said, a lot of people felt he should have gotten the opportunity. And that wasn't far-fetched. I guess the only negative for him, and I don't consider it a negative given what was on the roster, he had coached most of 3 seasons with Orlando, somewhere between like 2012 and 15, and they had very poor records, but he didn't have much talent on that team. And so, people were happy, I guess, if that's a word to use, that the players respected him and they played hard. He just didn't have a lot of talent in the tank. But when you consider his career, he's the type of guy that should be given an opportunity. He played 12 years in the league as a reserve point guard. He was on a championship San Antonio team, I believe it was in 07, with Duncan and company. And he's been a coach in the NBA ever since he retired, mostly as an assistant.
And he's been a coach with the Nets for a couple of years.
Yeah, so I mean, you would think he would be the kind of guy you would turn to with the experience he has, knowing how to relate to the players. So it's going to be real interesting to see how Brooklyn responds to him. But what about let's go let's go to the NFL. And before we do a little light recap of Week 8, there's been a lot of movement, player movement, in the last couple of days. Roquan Smith to Baltimore from Chicago. Chicago picked up Claypool from Pittsburgh, wide receiver. What's your take on this and anything else that's happened?
Well, Baltimore is a good move. This guy, Roquan Smith, is outstanding linebacker. So it's going to show up their defense even more so. So that was a good move on their behalf. It surprises me that, they say they'll have a few minutes, I guess, in this draft day to make a move, but they still haven't done anything at the wide receiver position, which just baffles me how they don't shore that up. And given that Bateman is going to be out, but they don't know how long.
Yeah, for several weeks.
Yeah, they think they'll make them be active and try to get somebody to do something at wide receiver. That's been one of their weak points of their offense for the last few years now, since Lamar's been there pretty much. Other than Hollywood Brown's probably the best wide receiver that they've had, and he's gone. So I'm kind of surprised by that.
No, it's a good point, because as we're recording this on November 1st, and the trade deadline ends in about 10 minutes.
Right.
So, I'm with you on that. I'm really surprised that they haven't done anything.
No, I don't understand it at all. They didn't do anything to draft. They haven't done anything anywhere else, any trades or anything. So that really surprises me.
Yeah. I'm thinking that the tight end / wide receiver likely that they drafted out of Coastal Carolina in the 3rd or 4th round. He played very well in that game against Tampa Bay when Andrews went out.
He did.
And so you wonder if they just think that's what he can do on a regular basis. I say tight end / wide receiver because he's listed as a tight end about 230, but he has some, he moves like a big wide receiver. And so it'd be interesting how he's incorporated. And if he actually plays as well as he played against Tampa Bay going forward, and they get Bateman back with Andrews, they may have, along with Duvernay, who's played well. I mean, maybe that's what they're looking at.
It's probably what they're looking at. But even at that, I'm still baffled that they haven't made a more substantial, a proven move for a receiver. There's several people available apparently, and they haven't made any moves at all to get them. And even though these guys might, turn out to be very successful, and I hope they do, you can tell until they get a chance, but we'll see. But I'm just baffled by the fact that they haven't done anything more substantial in that area through the last few years. So I don't know what they're thinking about in Baltimore. But that's definitely a good move to shore up their defense. You can always a good move to do that. There's been a trade with Miami. Miami picked up Chubb, the linebacker from the Denver Broncos.
Wow. Wow, that's a big move.
That is.
Yeah, he's one of. I mean, actually, he's one of the premier defensive players in the entire league.
He is. So that's a huge move. And they gave up Chase Edmonds, a running back.
Chase Edmonds.
Edmonds,
Yeah.
And they gave up a first-round draft pick in 2024 as well. But that's going to do wonders for their defense down there in Miami. Get a guy like Chubb, who's young. He's just like his third year. I think he's a young guy, very effective.
Yeah, that's a big move. So you can tell that with these deals, the teams that are acquiring these players, they believe they have a serious chance to make a serious run at the Super Bowl title. And go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, if we go to the Bears and trading getting Claypool from the Steelers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a move for present and future. They get a young, talented wide receiver. They give a guy that Justin Fields needs. Because Chicago trading in the last couple of weeks, trading Roquan Smith, their best linebacker, and their best defensive lineman, and Quinn last week to Philadelphia.
Yeah.
But what they're doing is they're acquiring draft capital to go out. And then my understanding is they have a significant amount of money over the cap. Cap money available, I should say, under cap ceiling. And so between the draft choices and the money they have available in free agency, the idea is going to be over the next year or two, they're going to be able to really beef up their roster, particularly on the offensive end. So Claypool actually is one of the first moves because he's clearly a good wide receiver.
He's a very good wide receiver.
They got him for a second-round pick. And so that's a very good acquisition for Chicago.
That is. And the key thing is now, like you said, they just have to make the right choices in their draft picks and get lucky and pick the right guys that really develop for them. But they put themselves in a great position potentially for the future. No question about that.
And I know Justin Fields, who's played well the last couple of weeks, has to be elated.
Oh, I'm sure he is. I'm somebody to talk to. Especially since they seem to finally change their offensive philosophy somewhat and the way they use it. So that should work out pretty well for them. I would imagine. Yeah.
There was another pretty big acquisition. I don't know if it fell on the radar. The Vikings picked up T.J. Hockenson, tight end from Detroit, and he's solid. He's not a superstar, but he's another receiving target. Cousins can throw to, and they already got Jefferson, and they got Cook in the backfield. Thielen, he's more of a possession receiver, but it just gives him another person to spread the field, man. So that's a very good pickup, and I think they got him for a second or third round pick. So these teams are going for it, man. These teams believe they have a good shot.
Yeah. Minnesota's determined not to have their usual second half fade.
Right.
Looks like they've been playing very well.
Yeah.
They keep that up. Yeah, this is their time to take the mantle from the Packers, it looks like.
Yeah, the Packers in trouble, man. They're 3 games behind Minnesota, and even though that's not insurmountable, but when you consider how each team is trending, it doesn't look good for the Packers. The one thing that's in the Packers and any of these teams that are struggling's favor is the fact that there's 17 games and 7 teams make the playoffs.
Right, absolutely.
And so there's still time left for a number of these 3 and 4 teams, 3 and 5 teams, if they can catch a little lightning in the bottle. And you may not, if you're 3 and 5 like Green Bay, you might get in at 9 and 8. So 6 and 3 is a solid second half, but it's not like going 9 and 1. And so just depending on how everything falls. So it's going to be interesting going forward. You got any observations? Week 8 completed with Cleveland spanking Cincinnati last night, 32-13. Jacoby Brissett outplayed Joe Burrow. Nobody wants to say too much about that for obvious reasons. 17-22, 278, touchdown, no picks. And he rushed for a TD, and he was throwing some dimes.
Right. He was.
He was throwing some dimes last night.
Very good game. But what they always do to guys like him, and it's disgusting. I saw a broadcast on CBS Sports Channel, and I forgot the gentleman's name. But the first thing he says is, Jacoby Brissett proves that he's a good backup quarterback. It's just absurd the way they do these guys, man.
It's called minimizing them.
Right, absolutely. And like I said, I can think of 6 teams right now that he's better than the quarterbacks they have, but he's playing better than the quarterbacks in hand. I can name it if you want me to, but I don't think it's necessary. But he's been playing well, and he just shows what he can do when he gets protection. The offensive line played a very good game. He wasn't under a lot of pressure. I think he only had a couple of pressures during the game. And he's an accurate passer. He makes good decisions usually. And he had a really outstanding game yesterday.
Yeah, he did. And to your point about the dismissiveness and the minimization, I watched, and I generally don't like to call out these shows, but I'm going to call this one out. I ended up watching the entire KJ and Max, Keyshawn, J. Will, and Max show. And I was just trying to, see what they were talking about early on and what they, what they're going to say about the Cleveland-Cincinnati game. And I watched or listened to the entire program. The only time Jacoby Brissett was mentioned was in passing about Deshaun Watson will be replacing him soon. There was no discussion of what he did in the game. I think there was a brief highlight before showing him throwing a touchdown pass. But the entire discussion from a Cleveland standpoint was Stefanski has Cincinnati's number. Nick Chubb, who played a very good game, rushed for 101 and 2 TDs and a 2-point conversion. Amari Cooper playing well. Myles Garrett playing well. The offensive line playing well. But no mention of the guy who goes 17 to 22, 278 and a touchdown. And then on the other side, they talked about Burrow not getting protected, and they kept flashing his 25 for 35 for what 232, 2 TDs and a pick, which are not actually bad numbers. And they just kept it on the screen. And man, the ultimate in what I call minimizing on one side and kind of letting you, that's not, Burrow didn't play that bad. This offensive line, blah blah blah. Man, it's and again, for those who think we're picking. This goes on all the time.
Absolutely, without fail. You see it over and over again, and it's disgusting, but it continues. It's not surprising at this point anymore. Yeah. It's just so unfair the way they treat these guys and try to dismiss them. Yeah.
And I'll now that we're talking about Brissett, there was a play late in the second quarter where Brissett got a pass off. He was hit by one guy, but when I say hit, that was illegal. It was legal. But then Trey Hendrickson Cincinnati defensive end, came in late and kind of hit him in the chest. And Jacoby grabbed him. He fell and grabbed either his shoulder or his chest. And so when they played it back, Aikman and Buck just basically said, we didn't see much there. Now, first of all, it should have been a penalty. And that's the first thing they should have said. And then they say, I didn't see much there. When you saw it, you can clearly see that he did something, and it was clearly a late hit. And again, I'm going to go there. If that had been Myles Garrett hitting Joe Burrow the exact same way, it would have been a penalty. And if it hadn't been, Buck and Aikman would have been telling you it should have been.
Absolutely. They'd be raising hell about Aikman and Buck are as racist as anybody on national television broadcasting. They're subtle, but they're consistent. And just things like that. They do that over and over and over again. My sister was watching a game one day, and she told me she couldn't stand it. She had to turn the TV off, the sound off, which I told her I do a lot of times when I watch it. And she said because she couldn't believe how racist they were. So it's not our imagination at all. If people listen to what they do all the time, they minimize the impact to African American players and maximize anything that happens to any European player, a quarterback or any other position. It goes on and on and on. And it's consistent with what goes on in the society on a daily basis in every walk of life. So, it shouldn't surprise anybody that these things happen. And, people might think we're oversensitive and all that kind of crap. But, when you live with this kind of treatment all your life and you see this play out day after day in your entire existence, it doesn't surprise you anymore. And you are very aware of it when it happens. So.
Yeah, and it's so normalized for the folks who do this is that They just do it and they continue to do it. Nobody pays attention to it. And I've always felt they know they do it. You cannot tell me that in the production meeting this morning on that program I mentioned earlier that whether it was said that whoever made the final determination, you have to go the extra mile to keep him out of that.
Right.
There would be no place else a guy could have that kind of game, be the leader of the team in that position, and never be mentioned. Stats never shown. For 2 hours. When you spend probably 45 minutes of that entire show at different pieces of the show, different parts of the show, speaking to that game.
Exactly.
And
I was going to tell you how great Joe Burrow is, as he calls him. That's one of his golden boys. Can do no wrong. It's disgusting. It is disgusting,
man. And it really, it takes away from the ability to just watch a game.
It does.
Yeah, you can't just watch a game. Why? No. You say to yourself, why can't you be fair? What's so difficult about just being fair? What's good for the goose is good for the gander. If a late hit's a late hit on a Brady, it's a late hit on Brissett.
I know. But the answer, unfortunately, to the question that you just raised is that what else are they fairing?
Right. No, well, it's obvious.
Unfortunately, we hope for too much from a source that continually disappoints us with the egregiousness. It just goes on and on and on in everything, and so it's no surprise that it happens in sports announcing and everything else. It's disgusting nonetheless and unfair.
It is
something that we have to continue to battle against, like everything else we have to battle against. To try to get some justice in this society.
Yeah, some objectivity, some fairness, because the fight has always not been about preferential treatment. The fight has always been about, be fair, leave us alone and let us do what we need to do, and we'll be fine.
Exactly.
Not all the narratives that they create.
Exactly.
Don't even let me get started about their preferences and their legacy treatments, and they, they're
that's normal.
Yeah, and
that's them.
how they 1.8 high school student gets into college because his daddy was a this, that, and the other, or donated a wing to the library. I mean, don't get me started on that.
I know.
Don't get me started. Hey, we talked about how Cleveland spanked Cincinnati to end Week 8, and that actually moved Baltimore a game ahead of Cincinnati in the AFC North. And Baltimore opened Week 8 with a road win at Tampa Bay. Lamar Jackson went 8 for 8 in the second half, 94 yards, 2 TDs. And Baltimore, who just a few days earlier was kind of reeling, that loss to the Giants at 3-3 in a span of 4 days. They beat Cleveland. And Lamar played error-free, and then they come back and they beat Brady in Tampa Bay. Lamar plays a really good game, and now all of a sudden Baltimore is 5-3, a game up on Cincinnati. They play a week from last night against New Orleans, and then I believe they have their bye. Picked up Roquan Smith. So and Baltimore's schedule. Now I know you got to be careful with that schedule thing because in the NFL they're all professionals, and you can get bit at any time. But if you look at their schedule, the toughest part of their schedule is behind them. They've played Buffalo, they've played Miami, Tampa Bay for whatever that is for right now. Man, Baltimore look like they might make a serious run.
They're in position to.
They're in position to. That's a good point.
Right. It's just a matter of them, like you said, they showed up in defense, and it depends a lot on how many of these guys get back to full strength and they're able to play on the offensive side, because they've had problems with that, and so if they can shore that up and get through the rest of the season without any major injuries. I mean, the tight end is hurt a bit. Bateman is out for a couple of games. All that kind of stuff.
Right.
A suspect. So they have a lot to deal with. So we'll see what happens. But they are in a good position. All things being equal, to make a serious run. I hope they do. Hope they do. Yeah. I can't go without talking about the Panthers.
Okay.
Oh man, my poor Panthers, man. I can't say my Panthers. I only say my Panthers because I live there. I'm not a Panthers fan necessarily. But that game they played against Atlanta was it was crazy, and it's a shame that they lost because it would have put them in a really. They would have been tied for first place in their division had they won the game. They had the game in their hand. I guess you heard the controversy about DJ Moore.
Right.
Miraculous near the end of the game.
Yeah, I actually saw it.
You saw it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then saw him dive and catch, beautifully thrown ball, and just a perfect play. And he got up and pulled his helmet off before getting off the field. And that's a no-no in the NFL. You pull your hat off, helmet off on the field. It's an unsportsmanlike penalty, and it's 15 yards. And they wound up having to move the point after attempt 15 yards back further. The guy wound up trying to make a 48-yard field goal, but it turned out to be, and he missed it. And they went on to overtime and had another opportunity and to win the game. The kicker missed a much shorter field goal.
Yeah, I think it was like 33 yards.
33 yards, he missed that. So, but the point being, had DJ not had observed the rules, not pulled his hat off the helmet off the celebration, they probably would have won the game. Given that if the guy would have kicked the normal field goal, they would have won the game at 1 point.
Yeah, extra point.
Yeah, extra point.
Yeah.
Extra one. I'm sorry, extra point. So it gets to the point with these guys. It just drives me crazy to see players constantly do stuff like that. These dead ball, ridiculous fouls. Regardless of how you feel about the rule, and there's some talk now about doing away with that rule because it's these guys have to remember they play in the NFL, which has been derisively called the no fun league. You can't celebrate. You can't show any exuberance. The officials there watching you. I don't know what takes you over the line other than this helmet thing, where they're gonna throw it on sports a lot of money. But going to the game that you're not supposed to do that. And for a guy to do this, look at me, look what I did, kind of stuff. Putting himself ahead of the team in my opinion. Just over and over again, get these ridiculous fouls, and it's cost them a victory that they could have been in a perfect position. The ramifications are just so great. I just sick and tired of seeing guys do that kind of stuff. But going against the rules, don't do it. It's as simple as that. So all these excuses about, well, he was this, he was that, I don't want to hear it. He's a pro. He knows the rules going in. Don't violate the rules, and you don't suffer that kind of horrible loss.
Yeah, and I think this is the type of thing where I think it's probably generational, and it's in terms of the acceptance of it. We're from more of a generation of act like you've been there. You want to have what I'd like to call balanced exuberance. Hey, yay, but all these shenanigans, the profiling and look at me and the dancing and as much as that can be entertaining, and I'm not one of those people that I can't find entertainment in it, but this is where I kind of separate myself from that stuff. Is that so much of that is practiced. And they're thinking about that before, whether it's a sack or you're on the field, a touchdown. And so my whole thing with that is if you spend a disproportionate number of time trying to prepare for a time to do something like that, it takes you away from the more serious aspects of what you should be doing. Now, people might think, hearing this like, man, you really are a dinosaur. But some of it I don't understand. I don't understand. And probably, and I'm not excusing DJ Moore, I probably have a better, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but I could probably make an allowance for that more given that he thought they had won the game even though there was still 12 seconds on the clock. But I have a bigger problem when I see guys getting a sack and they dancing around and they running halfway up the field. And, it's like, man, get ready to play the next play. Get ready to play the next play. It's like... And if you're going to wait till the game is over, if you're going to do your happy dance and your Wait till the game is actually over. Then maybe you can all run to the middle of the field and all do whatever you want to do. And I'll never understand it. You see it in basketball. A guy make a dunk and he's profiling, doing the airplane, or you're too little, and I guess for me, I don't actually find it entertaining. I don't understand how people find that entertaining anyway. You know, the guy's 7 foot and he dunks, and he's profiling. Like, you 7 feet tall, man.
So what, right?
You know, it's just like, I don't get it. And then it makes me pay. Yeah, and I keep forgetting about that. That's where my dinosaurism is showing. I keep forgetting about that aspect of it. That these guys are trying to sell themselves and market themselves. You know, I keep forgetting about that, you know.
Right. But the bottom line for me is, it's not that he couldn't have got up and jumped around and been happy about catching the pass. But he knows he can't pull himself off.
Exactly.
That's all I'm saying.
No, I'm with you. I'm with you.
How do you do it?
And then it makes me pay more attention to the rare guy. I mean, remember how Jim Brown, I know that's back in the later ball, or OJ, or Barry Sanders, is, you know, hand the ball to the ref, lay it down. And I don't know if he always does it because I don't see Cleveland all the time, but last night, Nick Chubb scored 2 touchdowns, and he held the ball, he kind of, you know, got a congratulations with his teammates. He didn't do anything else. He just seemed more normal, natural, like, okay, this is how it's supposed to be. I don't know, man. I don't know.
I'm with you on that. Everybody doesn't do all those shenanigans, but, you know, it cost them in that one.
It did, man, and that's the cautionary tale. It's when it costs you. And, it cost them that game, man. I just, like, and you're talking about how they could have been tied for first. Not only would they have been tied, it would have been a 4-way tie at 3-5. They would have owned the tiebreakers.
That's right.
Because they'd have beaten Tampa Bay and Atlanta in back-to-back weeks.
Right.
They'd have been 2-0, I think, in the division or something, or 2-1 or something. But they would have been leading the division.
Right.
And it would have been such a great moment for both P.J. Walker and even more so interim coach Steve Wilkes.
Absolutely.
You know, because if he could have followed that Tampa Bay win with that win, they'd have had to start looking at this, man. But now they're going to be so deflated. You just hope he can keep that together, man.
Yeah, I hope not. Yeah, but they, I hope they'll continue to rally around and do the best they can. Nobody's expecting anything from them, especially after the trades and stuff like that. So, it's a shame that happened. But hopefully everybody learns something.
And you talked about it being a perfect pass, man. I looked at it again. That ball was 70 yards in the air because DJ Moore caught it about 4 or 5 yards in the end zone, and P.J. Walker released it on his own 35. I mean, you can't throw a prettier pass for that distance. I said, whoa. And running to his left, too.
Yeah, that's right. P.J.'s been playing very well.
Yeah.
This is the best I've seen him play since he's been there. He's getting a decent chance. And he's going to start again. He's going to continue to start as long as he's playing well.
And, that's what happens, man. You get that confidence, you get a chance. Because he's only started 4 or 5 games in his whole career.
Exactly.
Because I think the Tampa Bay start was only his 4th career start.
Right.
And Atlanta was 5th. So, I mean, it just shows you, if how he's played those 2 weeks is any indication, boy, I don't know if Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold are going to get back in there anytime soon.
I don't think they will. I don't think so, no. If he continues to play where he's playing, and they're taking the wraps off the game with him. The first game was, we can kind of throw that out, but they didn't really let him play. And they throwing screen passes and not, only do on the ball, didn't let him throw any passes downfield. Right. He's been playing very well, very accurate so far. So, good for him. I hope he continues to do that. Moving on to another team, the Eagles are rolling. Continue to roll. They look excellent. And again, they played. What can I say about Hurts and those guys? And now they added Robert Quinn to the mix.
Yeah, Jalen threw 4 TD passes and
Brown had 3 of them.
Yeah, man, it's
that's something. They rolling, man.
And they will. I guess Hurts goes home because Week 9 starts with Philly playing Thursday night at Houston. So Lovie Smith's gonna have his hands full with Philly.
Yeah, I think so. Philly's playing really well, and like to stay healthy, they're gonna keep rolling. Keep rolling.
Before we get off, go ahead.
I was going to say the Seahawks.
Oh yeah, man. Geno.
Geno and the boys, man, they're rolling, man.
Yeah.
The young guys are playing well. Alexander, talking about him being the offensive rookie of the year now, and the running back.
Kenny Walker. you going back about 20 years because Alexander was a great back in Seattle. Yeah. Hey, you're introducing the audience to a great back out of the past. You know, he won an MVP back in the day.
So senility helps sometimes. Walker, yeah. He's continuing to play well. I'm happy for him. He's doing what he did in college, man. He was low at Michigan State, so yeah.
There's some good key games coming up. You got the Rams at Atlanta, and I know LA is now 3-4, but given they're the defending champions, that's a big game for both teams because Atlanta now is leading NFC South. You got, I guess, Buffalo at the Jets. Now, I know the Jets are not in Buffalo's class, but the Jets are at home. And so that's a good AFC East matchup. So it's interesting if the Jets' defense can slow Buffalo's offense. So it might be something to watch for a little while. For a little while because Zach Wilson for the Jets is looking really bad right now.
I know.
Looking really bad.
He's just not the answer for them. I don't think.
He's really careless with the ball. I try to, I like to be consistent with all young quarterbacks.
Right.
Because it's, I think it takes time, but you got, his own words after this last game, he can't be so reckless. So they're going to really have to, him being reckless on top of them losing Breece Hall the week before, this improvement could go down the drain really fast. So, because that was a game they expected to win against New England and probably should have won it. But he just gave that one away. Another one, man, is like Seattle playing Arizona. Arizona's trying to stay in the mix, and it's in Arizona. So this is going to be a big game in the NFC West. If Seattle wins that game, man, they may take a foothold. No matter how good people think Frisco's going to be, Seattle would go up a game and a half on the Niners. I know that's not the end of the thing, but that would be, I think, 4 straight wins for them. And 3 on the road, I believe, if they win this game against Arizona. So they really, this could be one of those watershed games relative to, getting ready to move into the second half of the season.
That's right. Seattle proving it for real. They're not going away. Doesn't look like it.
And then a couple of just real quick, Tennessee is playing at Kansas City. I know Tannehill didn't play last week. They started the rookie Malik Willis, and even though he didn't throw a lot of passes, they leaned on Derrick Henry, 200+ yards.
Makes sense to me.
Makes sense, brother. We talk about it all the time. Makes sense.
It's amazing. Another 200-yard game.
Yeah. So it's that should be a good game with KC. So I think that's the Sunday night game. So we get a chance to see Derrick Henry and Mahomes and Kelsey and company. So. And then week 9 ends with Lamar in Baltimore at New Orleans. New Orleans shut out the Raiders. Man, the Raiders look pathetic, man, in that game.
I don't know what's going on there.
Look pathetic. Man, that was one. That might have been the worst performance I've seen with my own eyes this season. I mean, that was horrible. Their offense just.
It's hard to get shut out in the pros.
It is in this day and age. It is. It's very hard with the liberalized passing rules. You're right. You're right. So. But the Saints defense looked really good, man. They played really well. So that should be a good game because New Orleans is, they tied. They're a game out of first, and Baltimore is a game up. So that'll be a pretty good game.
It should be.
Yeah. So the NFL, it's getting ready to get into this. I guess second half. Now that it's 17 games. You're at the halfway point when you play 8 or 9 games. So everybody played 8 games. So I guess we're at the halfway point. Any other NFL overviews before we move on? Though I do have a couple, but it's more about what's happened maybe off the field. But anything about on the field?
Well, Miami looked great.
Oh, yes.
Two look healthy, and I'm glad he looked well, taking his since didn't show the after effects of the injuries he suffered. Played very well, and that receiving core. What can you say about them, man? They're just amazing. So I'm happy about that. The Packers were terrible. I don't know what's going on with the Commanders, man. It's like Taylor Heineke might be taking that job again. Huh?
Yeah, I mean,
a lot of it is makes a lot of mistakes, but they seem to win somehow. He gets out there, so.
Probably one of those things where you hear all these stories about Carson Wentz now in the third franchise where he doesn't. I guess his teammates don't particularly care for him.
Yeah, probably not.
And so what happens with a guy like Heineke that he's scrappy. He runs, he moves around, and maybe his teammates like him. And
it seemed to be the case. I've seen reports where guys were saying what a nice guy he is, and he's a regular guy. Some of his teammates making those kind of comments about him. And to your point, there you don't hear that being said about Carson Wentz at all anywhere. So that probably has something to do with it, I imagine.
Yeah.
It's going to be interesting to see how that unfolds. And the other thing is the Bills. The Bills are a tremendous team. And until this past game, Allen had been playing flawlessly. But he made some really bad decisions in the second half of that game. Interceptions he throws. And it kind of harkens back to the way he had played previously in his career, where he makes all kinds of mistakes. If he does that against good teams, it's going to cost them. He was able to get away with in the past game because they were so superior to the team they played. It makes you question him overall. He's super talented, but he has that propensity, it seems, to make those kind of decisions at crucial times. So we'll see what happens with that going ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you. Until he had this late season run last year, I know he had a really good year in totality in 2021. But actually, up until I don't have any numbers in front of me, but I'll just say until you got to the last maybe fourth of the season, he had a number of a great week, a decent week, a so-so week, and he was kind of up and down. And to your point, like he was in this game. And then looked like he had a 4 or 5 game stretch that ended the regular season. And then he had a couple of good playoff games that included the game against Kansas City, where him and Mahomes dueled it in that epic overtime game. And then he started off pretty good this year. So you kind of look at that and say, well, maybe he's arrived, he's gotten all that out of him. And then you turn around and you see what you saw. And even he said it. I saw some comments he made say, I can't do that. And so you just wonder sometime, a guy now is in his 5th year. But, to be fair to him, we saw Lamar make a play or two like that. So it's like, these guys, I don't know if it's just that they're so good that they think they can almost do anything at any time.
Right.
But yeah, and so, but you're right on time about him. He's a really good quarterback, but I still think that propensity to make that key play. And remember, Buffalo's has yet to get to, I think, the AFC title game. So it's not like they've been anywhere. And I think Nick Wright of First Things First, he keeps making that point. I have to agree with him. He said, oh yeah, they talking Buffalo. They're defending Super Bowl champions. They're defending AFC. And he's right about that when you think about it. And so he got to get past that hurdle, but he has a lot of promise. Real quick, and we're going to be all over the place. We won't, but you go back to now his draft class was out. It was his being Allen, Lamar. I think he was the 32nd pick, the last one of that 2018. Baker Mayfield, I believe, was the first pick in that draft, and Sam Darnold was he was top 4 or 5 pick. So those are 4 of those picks, and so everybody, obviously, if you came back today, you're going to go with Josh Allen and Lamar before Baker Mayfield and Sam Darnold. And then you go to 2020 draft. Burrow was 1, Tua was 5, I believe, or 4 or 5, and then Herbert was 1 behind him. And then you had, of course, Jordan Love late in the first round. He hasn't played, so you kind of take him out the equation. And then you had Jalen Hurts was the 5th quarterback taken, and he was taken the 2nd round. So think about that right now. Which JH would teams take? Now, I know all of the folk who, just because of the things we talk about, will take Justin Herbert over Jalen Hurts. But here's what I will say. It's good, and again, I'm going to say it. Justin Herbert's a good quarterback. Big, strong. He can run. He seems to be very composed. So I'm not dissing him. But if we're going to look at what they've done on the field, he hasn't been to the playoffs. Jalen Hurts has. And so there's a chance that he might not make it this year. So it's real interesting how this goes. And now Tua, up until this season, it's like, Tua, they made a mistake, Miami. But look what he's doing with those weapons.
Exactly.
Look what Tua's doing with those weapons. Oh, but man, Herbert got some great weapons. Eckler, Mike Williams. I know Keenan Allen's been out a while, but if you just look at the time he's been there, he has some excellent weapons.
Right. Good players on defense, too, so they have a good roster.
Yeah, man.
They've had some injuries, but everybody gets injuries. Your point is well taken. But that's what they always do. And then you remember, I know I keep harking back to this, like I pat myself on the back continuously. But I told you the night of the draft that the Philadelphia Eagles got the steal of the draft.
Yeah, you did.
They picked up Jalen Hurts. Because I watched him in Oklahoma, and he convinced me that he was the best quarterback coming out in that class for me. And I would have taken him at anybody. And I think he's proven his worth. And so I'm not surprised at what he's doing. I'm glad he got the opportunity. I really am.
Yeah. I'm with you.
The player, and he's just going to get better and better and better, in my estimation. Because this is really like his second year.
Oh yeah, because he only started the last, I think, 4 games of his rookie year.
Right.
And that's what just again, I guess just pulled my head off, hair out. When he in those 4 games, he actually played pretty well, but he was young. But you had people talking about, well, we don't really know if he, those 4 games. I mean, just how they treat guys. 4 games, 4 games.
So juxtapose that with somebody you haven't heard his name lately, but did Golden Boy from a few years ago, Lawrence.
Oh yeah.
I mean, he was the second coming of whoever, on the first coming. And what's happened with him? They don't even say anything.
Well, his rookie year it was all about Urban Meyer. So we but now what are you gonna say?
Yeah, what are you gonna say?
He's really been struggling.
He's 5-20.
Right.
In his last 25 games he's played, he's 5-20.
Yeah.
And I think he's thrown like 22 or 23. I think it's 22 touchdowns, 23 interceptions, something like that. It's just crazy. But they don't, you don't hear any talk about getting rid of him,
right? And to that point, now for me, I'm okay with young quarterbacks struggling, give them a shot.
Right.
But again, to your point, where I can be fair when I look at a Zach Wilson or a Trevor Lawrence or whatever, say, well, it's still in their second year, give them.
Right.
But it doesn't happen for everybody else.
No. Look at the way they're going to find Justin Fields.
I know.
It's ridiculous.
I know.
Ridiculous.
Yeah, I know.
But that's what they do. That's what they do. Trying to run him out of the league before he gets a chance to play.
Before he even gets a chance.
That's right.
So, yeah. Well, speaking of, since we're on the quarterback thing, we're probably a week or 2 late, but given how Dallas plays Sunday, Cooper Rush? Cooper Rush?
That was the most ridiculous thing.
I know, man. I just like.
That's what they do.
I mean, by all objective measures, and Cooper Rush played well as a backup.
He played
I mean, when you can go 4-1, I mean, you are to be lauded. I mean, he did well.
He did.
But if you know anything about the game, you could tell there's no way he's in the class of Dak.
No.
And people, and they lose their minds. But I'm gonna take it in a more serious vein. The thing that you heard it from Steve Young, the Hall of Fame quarterback, you heard it in a different. People were repeating it. How Dak Prescott could learn from Cooper from Cooper Rush. And here's now. I am old school. I believe you can learn from anybody. So I'm gonna preface this before I say it. But In all the history of the NFL, have you ever heard anybody ever say that a guy who was Doc is in his 7th season, started 7 years, a backup quarterback had 5 starts? Have you ever heard anybody, because they all have been injured in their careers and they had a backup come in, say you learn from the backup?
Exactly.
And I'm going to call it what it is. It's the most biased statement because you're talking about a black man learning from a reserve, nondescript, hardly known until those 5 games, white quarterback. Hell, Earl Morrow, who was a veteran to, Johnny Unitas.
That's right.
I mean, we could go on. I mean, I ain't going to go through the litany because, but you know where I'm going with this, man.
Of course.
I've never heard such insanity.
No.
But they go right there it's almost like this intelligence thing where he can learn from Cooper Rush.
Right. And the only thing that happened is that Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator, because he didn't have as talented a guy at quarterback, toned down his offense.
And ran
it in a way that made sense based on the type of team they had. Well, any team can play the game within certain boundaries where you run the ball. Don't try to force it down the field unnecessarily. You play great defense, and that's what Cowboys are doing. So he's kept that same pattern going. And now he is a guy that can make the throw down the field when they need to. Who can make the big play. Who can make the running play. So it's obviously going to be better. So that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Kellen Moore has gotten some, I hope he's gotten some sense when the fools see he's been doing since he's been there. Because his play callers was really ridiculous. If you go back and watch them through the season before this time, and they toned down, he went back to the running game. This is what Dallas has always been based on, running the football.
That's true, because throughout their history, when they won titles, from Dwayne Thomas and Calvin Hill to Tony Dorsett when they won their title, to Emmitt Smith when they won their 3 titles. You're right.
That's right.
You're right.
That's where you should play football.
Yeah.
Well,
they call it ugly football now, man. They call it ugly football. Ugly football.
She sure did the Patriots well for a long time.
I know, man. I know. Well, a couple more NFL things. I guess if they say NFL is king, so I guess we can go for a while. But I wanna. What do you think? And I won't spend a lot of time about Rodgers effectively throwing his teammates under the bus with some of his comments the last week or two.
Yeah, well, I'm not a big Rodgers fan. I'm kind of tired of him. And I heard a guy talking this morning. I think it might have been on the Keyshawn show. I can't think who it was. I think it's a former Packer, or maybe a former Bear. Yeah, I think it was a former. I'm not sure. Retired player. But anyway, they were asking what they thought he saw with the Packers, and he said, "I just see Aaron Rodgers get old."
Wow.
Yeah, he's not as good as he used to be. And he doesn't have the kind of receivers that he used to just be able to dance around, fool around, just throw the ball up. The guys would beat it and go get it. He said so he's not developing these guys. He said maybe these guys will step up and develop it to be that kind of play. So I just think Aaron Rodgers is not as good as he used to be, and he doesn't have the kind of weapons that he used to have. He thinks the Packers are done. Yeah. So I kind of agree with that, man. I'm tired of Aaron Rodgers. And he's one of those guys when things go right, it's all about him.
Right.
And when they go bad, it's everybody else.
Everybody else's fault.
Right.
He's the smartest guy in the room. He's the talented. It ain't me. I didn't do it.
Right.
He didn't get open. They'd have running the wrong routes, and
exactly. So I'm tired of Aaron Rodgers. He can go on with his foolishness as long as he wants to. But I think the Packers do, and it doesn't surprise me that he throws other people on the bus. That's all he's ever done.
Yeah, I mean, when you look back, it's true. It's been that way.
Yeah,
it's been that way. Well, there's a breaking news, man. Breaking news. There's been a big transaction in the NFL. Tom Brady is no longer the coach, offensive coordinator, motivator of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers anymore. He's now only the quarterback. And now we finally know who the offensive coordinator is. It's Byron Leftwich.
Losing a few games,
Yeah, they 3-5, and now all of a sudden it's Byron Leftwich. Before when the last 2 seasons, he was the coach, he was assistant coach. Brady was offensive coordinator. He was the motivator. He all the trades. He was a GM. Now he's 3-5. He's just a quarterback now. But man, that is so representative of what we talked about in all these different areas, man. That is it. You didn't know who Byron Leftwich was when they was winning.
True. That's true.
And now it's his fault when they ain't scoring, but 16, 17, or whatever they score, 18 points a game. So I just thought I had to throw that little levity in there, man.
No, you're absolutely right on the money with that.
Yeah, man.
That's definitely what happens all the time.
Yeah. So you want let's turn our attention, if we can, for a little bit to the college football.
Right.
There are some big games coming up, and let me back up. And I may have mentioned this earlier. If I did, just bear with me. Today's November 1st, and later on this evening, the first college football playoff rankings will come out. And those are the rankings that people follow closely that will culminate in the 4 teams playing for the national championship late in the year and early and into January. So I'm not going to get too deep into who I think it's going to be. I will say there are 6 undefeated teams right now, and it's 5 from the big Power Fives, and 1. You got TCU joining Georgia, Tennessee, Clemson, Ohio State, and Michigan, and then there's a number of 1-loss teams among the top ones: Alabama, Ole Miss from the SEC, Oregon, USC, and UCLA from the Pac. So one of the things I want to get your opinion on and discuss, there is, to date, the game of the year. Georgia and Tennessee play this weekend. They're both undefeated, 1-2 in the polls, probably be 1-2 in the first playoff ranking, and the winner will be in first place and in the driver's seat in the SEC East, I believe it is, as they get ready to play in the conference title. And then the other big game, again in the SEC, is LSU plays Alabama for the SEC West lead. They both have 1 loss so far. Alabama, of course, lost to Tennessee by 3 points a couple of weeks ago. And LSU, they lost to, I believe it was they beat Ole Miss. I can't remember. Who did LSU lose to? They lost Tennessee. So the winner of this game will be in a driver's seat for the SEC West. So any initial observations of any of those games, anything else in college football?
Well, like everybody else, I'm looking forward to this Tennessee-Georgia.
Oh, man, yeah.
That should be quite a game. And the way the Tennessee's been playing, it's hard to imagine their offense being shut down. But I guess if anybody can do it, it's going to be Georgia, because Georgia's been playing lights out on defense. So that's going to be an interesting battle. I guess it's a matter of how well Tennessee's defense can hold up against the Georgia offense. I think that's what it's going to come down to. Because I don't see the brother playing quarterback at Tennessee being slowed down too much.
Yeah, Hendon Hooker.
He's been playing out of this world. So what can I say? That's obviously the marquee game. I'm looking forward to seeing it. And I don't have a strong feeling of who's going to win it. I guess if I'm rooting for Tennessee. Just like to see a little changing of the guard and this college stuff. Kind of tired of seeing the same teams over and over every year. But that's going to be a heck of a game.
Yeah, one of the things, the loser of the game is still is going to be in the hunt to play in the national title game, because not only is the SEC the dominant conference, and it's not uncommon for a 1-loss team from that conference to get in the Final Four, but if the game is relatively close, and if that's the only loss either one of those teams end up having, they will still get in the final. Yeah, they'll still get in, because Tennessee already has the win over Alabama, and they have the win over LSU. So if they lose to Georgia, and Georgia ends up in the conference final against the SEC West, I see Tennessee still getting one of the 4 slots. But I mean, there's a lot. I mean, so much could happen. But I'm just, and the same vice versa if Tennessee beats Georgia. So the loser is not out, but the winner is definitely in. Even if they lost in the conference final. And then and I think the intriguing game is Alabama and LSU because if LSU, I don't think LSU really has a chance to get into the Final Four because they already have 2 losses. Right. But you never know if they run the table. If they beat Alabama, they beat the Georgia, Tennessee in the conference final. That might be enough. You know, it might be enough 2 wins and have those kind of wins. But right now, I would, and they've also beaten Ole Miss. And not that Ole Miss is great, but they are like 11th ranked, I think, in one of the wire service polls, 8-1. So LSU has already quality win over Ole Miss. If they ran the table, they might get in. So, and then of course, Ohio State and Michigan will play later in the year, and they both will probably be undefeated when that game starts. So the winner of that game will definitely probably get in, even if they lost the Big Ten championship. Right. So I think the interesting one is going to be Clemson because of their pedigree. If they run the table, they'll get a spot. Though the ACC is a little bit down. Right. And so I think Clemson can't afford to lose a game. I think that's the issue there. So. That's about all I got there. The last thing I'll say is the Heisman Trophy. Hooker might wrap it up if he has a big game against Georgia.
That's true. There's a guy who's not getting any attention who I think should get at least some mention in the Heisman thing. Since it seems, well, first of all, I'm tired of the Heisman being a quarterback-only kind of
I'm with you.
Contest,
I'm with you.
They need to come up with some kind of award just for quarterbacks and some other way they evaluate, players and their performance. But since it is what it is, there's a guy in North Carolina who nobody's mentioning, Drake May. He's a registered freshman, having an outstanding year, and his numbers are comparable to or better than Stroud and Young. Yeah, he has like 2,600 yards passing. He's averaging like 33.9 yards a game. His 29 touchdowns and I think only 3 interceptions.
Wow.
His quarterback rating is 185.5. He's the leading rusher on the North Carolina team, and Carolina's 71. They only lost to Notre Dame, and they're ranked number 17 this week, I think. And just want to mention him because he deserves to be mentioned with all these other guys. And outstanding year he's kind of having in the shadows,
No, you've educated me because I really hadn't heard of him until you had mentioned him the other day.
He's a redshirt freshman, and it's interesting. His father played quarterback in Carolina back in the 80s, and his older brother played basketball. I think his last season was in 2019. He was a senior year. He was a forward on the Tar Heels, and a decent player too. Pretty good player. He had some big games for them. He was the main target on that team. So they have a Carolina history in the family, and he's still holding the standard pretty high. Yeah.
No, that's a good one for someone to watch. The reason why he won't win it though is, well, there are tiebreakers. I mean, even with the statistics he has, Stroud of Ohio State, Hooker of Tennessee, and Young of Alabama all play for much higher profile teams, higher ranked teams. Teams that are on national TV more, they're going to probably have more high-profile performances. And the fact that of those 4, including May, he's the only one that's a freshman. So there would, even though we've seen younger players, because back when I was a kid, it was unheard of. You had to be a senior, maybe a junior. I can't remember what year it was when the first sophomore ever won it, but it was almost. That's changed a little bit now, but still, everything else being equal, sometimes the writers who vote for this will say, well, he has 3 more potentially. So I'm going to give it to Hooker, who's a this, or I'm going to give it to whatever. But I'm glad you brought them up because, man, that's I'm going to be looking for him. Dynamic player. I'm going to let's go off the sports field. I got a couple of things I want to throw out there. You might have some others or you want to participate. One will be what's your take on this horrific attack on Paul Pelosi, the husband of the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi.
Horrific is the word. And what is even, as bad as that is, what is worse has been, in my opinion again, obviously, what is worse is the reaction of these so-called Republican politicians and some of the things that they said about it, some things they haven't said about it. There are reports of people trying to make it some type of homosexual thing with, some male prostitute kind of situation. I just heard today in the news here that this ridiculous clown lieutenant governor of North Carolina, Scotty Robinson, he's a Trump, head of Trump's butt Republican, African American, and put out something on his, I don't know what account it was, something on the internet where he had a doll, said the Pelosi attack doll or something like that. We had an image of a male doll in a pair of shorts. All he had on was underwear and a hammer in his hand. And it was like a doll set. It comes with 2 pairs of shorts and 2 hammers. Making fun of this thing. This guy was almost killed by some nut who was spurred on by this right-wing rhetoric, all this stuff, stealing the election and hang Nancy Pelosi when this January 6th riot and all this, insurrection, wasn't a riot, it's insurrection that took place in D.C. And it's just a continuation of all this stuff that these racist, so-called Republican politicians and followers have been putting out into the world. And you get these nuts acting on this stuff and doing something like that. That was horrific that happened. And if she had been home, she might have been killed or injured, and that's who he was looking for. What can I say? It's the state of this country, and in a lot of ways, it's the state of the world. It's just madness, bordering on anarchy. We have these lies, and these liars continue to perpetuate this stuff, and the system itself, the way it's reported in the news, and like it has some credibility to keep publishing these lies that these guys are putting out, led by this Trump, this clown, and all his racist followers. So it's terrible. What can I say? It's not surprising that something like that happens. I think it's something even worse than that will probably happen in the future. But it's part and parcel of what you get when you stir up this kind of animus among people. And people cannot lose gracefully, and you have this minority trying to push this fascist ideology in this country. And it's succeeding in a lot of areas. It's absurd and it's dangerous and sad.
Yeah, and I you said it very well. I don't have a lot more to add other than the fact that where a lot of people say, well, this is bad, and it's almost like they think it's going to get better, or it's a phase, or. But see, I strongly believe that this is intentional from people in high places, whether it's politicians or people on the right who have influence, money. They know that a lot of them control the means of communication, how things are spun, and like you say, how things are covered. And I think this is intentional, and they knew what they were going to get, and this is what they wanted. This is what they wanted.
I agree.
This is exactly what they wanted. And so I think that people are going to have to be vigilant and going to have to understand that they're going to have to fight back, because that's the only thing that's going to stop this stuff. And the intent not only is the power grab or the continuation of a certain amount of power, but all of this stuff is about intimidation to get people to I don't want to say this, I don't want to get involved. Because that's what this is about. To get people to stay in their little cubby holes and just kind of look the other way while they go ahead and rip off everything. And so, but I will say this, and I've said this for a number of years now, I'm not worried as much. I mean, even though we are generally going to be the biggest victims of all this mess, but we've unfortunately are probably better able to withstand it because of the history of what's happened to us. We're just made differently. And I know I don't want to celebrate our oppression, but I mean it in the context that this stuff doesn't surprise us. So we're going to figure out a way to combat it to mitigate it, survive and then thrive. But it's everybody else that you wonder about, because the people who are in positions of authority and influence that, let's say, are not these right-wing racists and misogynists and all these people, homophobes, whatever it is that they are and believe in, they need to step up. Whoever these people are, whether it's in the DOJ, and I know there's a lot of these right-wingers in all these places, but the ones who are not right-wing, it's time to stand up. If somebody's committed a crime, arrest them. Indict them. This is what just... And if they're not going to do it, it tells the rest of us, okay, well, we know, because...
Just look at the way they handle just Trump.
Oh, yes.
It's ridiculous this man hasn't been indicted yet. It's absolutely... Any other citizen in this country has done half the things he's done. He'd have been dragged in court, if not in jail, a long time ago. At least had a day in court to prove their innocence if they were, or their guilt or innocent. He hasn't even been indicted yet on anything. And now, Roberts, one of his stooges on the Supreme Court, steps up and is protecting him from turning over his tax return yet again. Which he's been trying to get since 2019, which every other presidential candidate or president has had to do. Somehow he gets not to turn over his tax records to Congress so they can see if there's any malfeasance in his corporation and stuff like that. And this is the kind of thing that the public has a right to know. But Justice Roberts just today has stepped in again to overturn the lower court's opinion, or block it at any rate, and give this guy another opportunity for the now Supreme Court to weigh in on this latest appeal to them as to whether or not Congress is going to get access to his tax records, which they were granted by the lower courts.
Yeah, I mean,
this court thing is ridiculous. It's partisan politics on the court, and they're controlled by these right-wing racist white people. And it's the bottom line, And your point is well taken as far as having the people respond to this kind of stuff in this country, or in the world at large, because it's our reality every day.
Exactly.
So it's nothing new. Since we've been dragged in, this is our reality. We've been fighting these battles in this war, and here we go again, trying to defend affirmative action. And that's before the Supreme Court. They're about to overturn that. They can't use race as a part of the calculus in college admissions at Harvard and the UNC and places like that. But they've already passed that in 9 states, California being one of them. And we're both, graduates of UCLA, and we knew that UCLA was at one of the heights of having a minority representation on that campus when we were there back in the 70s. And now, I think it was last year, they had 5,000, out of 5,000 freshmen coming in, there were 95 black kids. Yeah. 95 out of 5,000. And that's what happens when you don't have affirmative action. And this, one of the justices was, I guess when the last affirmative action ruling came down in the Supreme Court, Sandra Day O'Connor, I guess she brought up something about how long it was going to last. And somehow she kept some number about 25 years. So it was like 6 years left since that thing was passed. So some of these justices are asking now, well, after 6 years, should we do away with it altogether? And my answer to that is that it should last as long as discrimination lasted against black people when we were denied entrance into these institutions.
Yeah, absolutely.
And to this access. So we got another 200 some years to go before we start talking about doing something different. So it's the same old thing over and over again. And I've told you this before, and I'll share it with the listeners. My father was born in 1902, and he died in 1992. Black man, 90 years in this country, born in Brooklyn, New York. And shortly before he died, he looked in my eyes and told me, Jimmy, nothing has changed. Nothing has changed. My father never lied to me.
Yeah, man. It's, even this whole discussion of affirmative action just grates on me because, it's just like everything else. They get to like a moment in time and everything else didn't happen.
Right.
And that's why your point about, it should last as long as you discriminated and did horrific things to black folks. I often like to say that white Americans try to treat racism as if it happened on another planet.
Right.
And that, like, well, that happened up there. That, it's like, and that it's not happening anymore. And so that's why even when we have to defend things to try to give people a modicum of an opportunity to participate in the system, and so you say affirmative. As soon as you say affirmative action, you just getting with, and not dealing with the fact that their privilege, their affirmative action, their this, their that. And how they kept us. I mean, and that, you get into the hundreds of years of lynchings and laws on the books preventing black folks from owning property, going to school, and anything and everything, redlining, everything you can imagine. Couldn't participate in the GI Bill, for just everything you could think of. And then they want to talk about, and then they want to talk about bootstraps and. But then the minute, so even which I never believed, but even if one or two white folks didn't get in a particular school because blah, 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 so they're more important, which that's what they tell us, than the millions of black people you've discriminated against, maimed, killed, took their property, whatever, over the years. That's what they're basically saying.
Of course they are.
And so, and so they hide behind things like the Supreme Court and the jurisprudence part of it, and and block the blue. Man, we saw it when we were at UCLA in the 70s in the Bakke decision. Remember the Bakke decision? The was it UC Day? I think it was a UC. I forget. Was it UC Davis? He went to school, med school, wherever he was, and that was, I think, that the decision came down in 78. And the thing that beyond everything else is, and this is why your dad was so right, because if you looked at that decision in 1978. That was only 12, 13, 14 years after the civil rights, voting rights, all that. So what kind of commitment to correcting things, and then you already got things in the courts that are overturning things. Not 100 years later where you might try to make an argument like they're trying to make now. 12, 13 years after that.
Exactly.
So, man, goodness
gracious. It's like the old story that Malcolm X used to tell about, you don't stick a 9-inch knife into a man's back, pull it out 3 inches, call it progress.
That's it. That's it,
That's
brother.
just what they do over and over and over again.
That's it. That's it. And then tell you with a straight face. But see, that's why when we go back to, like, when we're talking about the quarterbacks and the narratives, that's why people have to pay attention to it, because that's how they normalize it.
Exactly.
And so...
non-important things.
There you go. Non-important things. That's how they do it.
Yeah, make it normal.
That's how they do it. If you can accept that's it. That's what I say all the time. That if you can normalize things that you can see that are not important, you're done with the things that you can't see that are important. What's going on in the boardrooms and all the other places. Yeah, I'm with you, man. The last point I have on off the field, you may have more. Bolsonaro of Brazil, the former president of Brazil, will not accept the results of the election, even though he lost. I mean, it's a relatively close election, but he lost by almost 2 percentage points and a couple of million votes. So it's not like, though it's close, it's not like it's 200 votes. And he's been referred to as the Brazilian Trump, right winger. I think the only thing that's the biggest difference between him and Trump, though, is he served in the military and he has a lot of connections in the Brazilian military. So there's this little scuttlebutt that if this lack of acceptance of the results, will he try to foment a coup with the military? I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, he's supposed to be making some type of speech sometime today.
Okay.
Standing and there's no telling what he's going to say or do. They said that he's not going to not accept the results of the election. That's the report I've heard so far. But I don't think he's made his speech yet. But I think South America and Central America is showing this continent, this hemisphere, the way to go. And it gives me hope that maybe, sanity will prevail in this country. And we did these right-wing fascist governments who, anti-climate change and all that other kind of stuff, and anti-poor people in general. And maybe this country will come to their senses and this midterm election not turn the reins of power over to these criminals and these racists, out and out racists, and the fascists in this Republican Party. I'm happy for what happened in Brazil with Lula getting another opportunity.
Yeah.
Like that, the majority of people there. The same thing has happened in Honduras and Colombia. It was elected leftist-leaning presidents. It's the first time, I think, in the history of Colombia.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
So it's like the Western Hemisphere is leading the way to sanity, possibly, in my opinion. And I just hope that this country people in this country are smart enough to follow suit and not let this rabid minority get control of the wheels of power, as well as they have control most of the narrative around here lately.
Yeah. I think in points well said, well taken. Lula da Silva, he was a former president of Brazil, and they imprisoned him unfairly, and he finally got it overturned, and so he's the one that beat Bolsonaro. And to your point about him speaking, I know I had heard yesterday that though he doesn't concede, he's speaking about how his supporters are protesting the injustice of the, so it's. Yeah, so it'd be interesting. It's same old same. It'd be interesting what his speech actually entails. So, you got anything else you want to add off the field? I got one more thing for the program, but I'll let you jump in there if there's something you want to throw in there.
No, I think that's pretty much exhausted my little list. Yeah.
Okay. I did want to speak before we get off the air to one of the greatest players who ever lived in baseball, and some people believe he's the greatest, Oscar Charleston. And what you always think of these great players, but trying to bring the past back to folk. Oscar Charleston, for those who don't know, was primarily a center fielder, left-hand hitting, left-hand throwing center fielder that played in the heyday of the Negro National League and the Eastern Colored League. His prime was like from 1920 through the early 30s. His career lasted into the early 40s. And the best way I can say it for those who know who Willie Mays is he was Willie Mays before Willie Mays. And one of the little tidbits that kind of speak to a certain period in history, in 1922, he finished third in the Negro National League in hitting, and he led in a whole bunch of other statistics, including home runs and ribbies. Now, the significance of that is the previous year he won a Triple Crown, and then in 24 and 25 he won a Triple Crown again. So he won 3 Triple Crowns in 5 seasons, man. And he was and then the other thing is that he also led in stolen bases at least 3 or 4 times in his career, and one of those was in a Triple Crown season. And there are those who say he was the greatest player that's ever lived. And so I just want folk to, if they want to read about him or just remember Oscar Charleston. He made the Baseball Hall of Fame in '76 when they, a few years after they came up with the Negro League induction committee. So he was one of the first ones following Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson and Buck Leonard, and came Oscar Charleston. So I just wanted to throw that out. I don't have nothing else to add, good brother. You got anything before we say goodbye until the next time?
No, just another interesting conversation, and I'm glad to have the opportunity to speak with you always.
Yeah, it's been fantastic, yeah. Man, this hour goes fast. I think we're up to almost an hour and a half. It's
before you know it, right?
Before you know it. Hey, man, well, we go ahead and conclude this. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure, like you say, as usual. And as usual, I know you're going to uphold your end of the bargain in that part of the world.
I'll do my best.
I know you will. I know that part of the world's in good hands, brother. So we'll say adieu, and until next time, we'll talk to the audience later. Take care.
Take care.
Later.